The Garden of Salvation is where I conducted my first raid, as it is the actual true conclusion of the Shadowkeep expansion. This is just at the normal difficulty as well, because there was no need for me to get it twisted just yet this early into my Destiny career. In order to add some context as to why we are returning back to the pyramid, we learned that the artifact we obtained is emitting a symbol that can be traced back deep into the Blackgarden. This could be a trap, and of course, we will proceed with the utmost caution. The raid starts, but we are actually at the Looking Glass location inside the moon. For some reason, this is where the portal that takes us into the Blackgarden's embrace is located. Once we pass through, we make our way up some stairs until we reach the first arena. The ruinous location, being covered in lush and overgrown flora, is a stark contrast from the filthy hive-covered moon. In the middle of this first room, there exists a stronger than normal harpy being constrained, and it won't attack us, for now. Some of the viewers in my stream joined me for this attempt in order to show me the ropes, and so I didn't just completely int on my first raid. We decided to keep it simple, and I only learned the mechanic for each section as I reached it. This first encounter is not that complicated. The only finicky gimmick is the way the tethering works, as that comes into play later, but once you learn how it operates, it's also fairly simple. It's just important to stay still for a second in order to make sure the light string can actually connect. I stand in front of the barrier, and with everyone connected, we can start the fight. I'm a part of the first group of 3 that stays inside this first room. The harpy is freed from its bindings, and it will start vomiting up some glitched cubes. I pick up the first one, and receive the voltaic overflow buff. It's important to decide in order of who picks up each cube, as each player can only hold one at a time, as if a glitch cube is left unattended to for a few seconds, then the entire party insta-wipes. While our first group is managing the boss, the second group is clearing the way forward by defeating a bunch of enemies. Upon reaching their checkpoint, they have to defeat a mini-boss enemy, which will then force the main boss to teleport over to them. After that is done, our group then catches up with the second group. This is where we run past them. Group 2 has to catch a spit of the boss this time around, and I need to help clear the trash mobs. I ended up dying here because my brain saw the glowing white circle and I thought that I had to run on over to enter it. In reality, it was simply where the boss was deciding to spawn in. Whoops. We die a minute later anyways because we didn't cycle the boss's spits correctly. I switched my weapon over from the Wishender to the Sunshot. The high single DPS of the Wishender was at odds with the task of me having to clear out multiple groups of enemies, especially when those enemies didn't have that much health to begin with. We restart the raid, and this time I at least know more of what to expect. EXO was supposed to grab the first spit, but since we started earlier than they thought, I ended up grabbing the first. This Quantum Cyclops kills me soon after. Even though its attack landed behind me, the area of its landing blast is much larger than I anticipated. This was unfortunate, but it does reset my buff, which could have come into play. My timer would have already run out by the time I picked the second one, but it was still pretty close. I tried to revive my teammate, but since I already revived EXO earlier on, I was unable to. The importance of this was learning that I had a limited amount of revives, which was displayed to me in the bottom right hand corner. The boss is stuck in this room for a bit, and in order to continue, we need to make a few jumps before tethering ourselves in order to break the next barrier. Once we break the barrier, we must now cross this beautiful field of flowers while chasing the boss. This section is pretty chill and mainly makes for some epic wallpapers. We get to open a chest, and that signifies the end of the first section of the raid. Pretty simple so far. The next section takes us into the undergrowth. The dark lighting along with the bioluminescent fauna makes jumping through this location a pleasing enough experience. If any of you remember Blackreach from Skyrim, this is basically the same vibes. We also get unlimited revives in this section as there is no boss, just some platforming. I also get shown this hidden chest. I literally cannot tell you how to get to it from the beginning right now, but I take those regardless. Some harpies try to get in our way, but we can take care of them, no problem. I suppose navigating your way up the first time around is probably a little annoying, but there were no thin catwalks or rage-inducing jumps, so overall this was pretty simple in my books. With this, we reach the start of the second phase of the raid. Being told what to do here made this sound way more complicated than it really was. Once the encounter starts, one person stays at the beginning conflux, while the rest of the fire team makes their way to second base. Person 2 stays at that conflux. We repeat this until there is one person at each of the 4 bases. The 2 remaining players then have to travel to each player in order to tether them with the conflux. This grants us the required buff to defeat the certain shielded enemies, as if too many enemies sacrifice themselves to the conflux, we insta-wipe. The real responsibility lies on each of the base hitters making sure they communicate how long they have until their buff runs out. With the proper comms, the jobs of the 2 runners is fairly simple and allows everyone to keep their buff active. The first time around, we died before even making it to the 4th base. I think we forgot to give one of the players the buff with the tether, or it ran out. Either way, it's important to keep the buff timer in mind. Eventually, some stronger than normal angelic enemies will attack each of the confluxes. However, if you have your runner with you when this happens, it becomes just another group of enemies to clear out. When all of the angelics that attack the confluxes have been defeated, the barrier is broken, and we are able to make our way towards the center stage in order to begin the next phase. This time, we must defeat the super angel Consecrated Mind, Soul Inherent itself. We tether ourselves and summon the creature. This phase requires us to divide ourselves into 2 groups once again. Team 1 will babysit the boss, and Team 2 will play Gambit. If you remember where the confluxes are, those will still be under attack. What Team 2 has to do is kill a special minotaur that spawns in, and then deposit the motes it drops at a conflux. This grants us the Enlightened buff, and is how we are able to kill the shielded enemies that begin closing in on us. This buff only lasts for 45 seconds, so ideally, your other teammates will help kill those minotaurs and cycle you out of the conflux when they have the motes. The first team that is babysitting the boss has to collect the spit from the boss. However, this time around, they get stuck in some sort of cage. The boss then opens up its wings and creates 2 layers of eyes. But there's a twist here, as only the detained player knows which eyes are the correct ones to shoot. If the wrong ones are shot, then the detainee will die. I'm not entirely clear on how exactly this is played out, as I was a part of the much simpler Gambit team this time around. But as long as the detained player calls out the correct eyes to shoot, then it seems like a fine enough time. After depositing enough motes, the boss is drawn towards the conflux. This is where both squads group up. Here, we just shoot the boss in all of its opened up eyes, which begins the damage phase of the fight. The boss will start moving backwards and towards the center of the arena. During this time, we have to damage the boss while continuing to move forward. Apparently, behind us, some spooky energy is closing in on us, but this was one of those don't turn around moments, so I don't actually know exactly what is happening behind me. We don't one-phase the boss, and thus have to repeat the mechanic a second time. It's fairly simple knowing how it works though. We kill the boss, and now just have to make our way back to the center. I follow my teammates and enter through the portal. Of course, with how Curse was just hovering outside of it, I had my suspicions, yet went through it anyways, just like how you click that like button. Funny enough, my hesitation saved me because I was able to stand on a few pixels on the edge of the portal. Not that it mattered because I got pushed off by the next player going through regardless. Honestly, before going through the portal, I thought that we reached the end, especially since we beat the boss from the beginning area. Of course, since we kept on continuing forward, I realized almost instantly that this wasn't the case. While making some jumps across, I encountered these massive windmills. These make for quite the epic sight. I tried to use one to take me to the top, but instead fell all the way down. I collect myself and continued up, but get Warlock jumped. Do not remind me about the fact that I do indeed have Icarus Dash. After that, we stumble into another absolutely jaw-dropping sight in the garden. The waterfalls in the distance just add such a grandiose vibe to this location. After missing a few more jumps, we can make our way up even more. Here, we get a much further view of the entire garden. I have no idea how the skybox works in this location, but damn, the environmental artists are on something. I only need to walk for another minute before witnessing the final boss of this raid. Being the last encounter, a bunch of the mechanics come together for this fight. Instead of 2 teams of 3, we instead form 3 teams of 2. Once the fight begins, an angelic creature will spawn. Once it dies, the boss will then create either a blue or red portal. One of the pre-decided teams will go through either portal and get teleported across the map. With Tio, I go through the blue portal. In this location, we have to kill a bunch of enemies and collect their motes. The third team stays over at the final boss and pulls us out of the portal when we have enough motes. We then deposit those motes to their required conflux upon returning. Team 2 does the same thing, but they go through the red portal the first time around. After that, we just alternate the portal order. EXO ends up disconnecting and then gets stuck all the way outside the windmills, so none of us can even revive them. We decide to just die and restart the raid. Anyway, depositing the motes grants us the same enlightened buff that are used to kill the Vex before they reach the conflux. Personally, I felt that there were just not enough trash enemies to kill. Even with some knowledgeable people on my side, I'm struggling to do anything. Literally, I'm not doing anything for way too long during all of this downtime. Like, there should not be downtime in the first place. The platforms also break after a certain amount of time and can be rebuilt by using the correct tether points. We barely need to use this though because there's enough rocks to jump onto in the first place. With enough motes banked, a cross forms near the boss. This is where we tether to it in order to destroy the boss's shield in order to begin the damage phase. One of my teammates has the weapon Divinity, which creates a large crit spot. My launcher gets body blocked twice, and even though I hit the boss, I think it misses the giant crit spot twice, since each hit only did 13k each. The boss drops back down, and we have to repeat the previous mechanics 2 more times. Honestly, this was kind of my fault, as I don't think the rocket launcher was the best choice for damage against this boss. Sanctified Mind, Soul Inherent, goes down. It's actually kind of interesting to fight against some titled mind enemies that weren't just Hydra. The pyramid opens up and we can drop down in order to collect our reward. It's here that we see the masked statue of the figure Eris Morn got her powers of darkness from. The cascading layered robes give off major Ring Wraith vibes, but we don't learn any more. Overall, this raid was pretty cool. None of the mechanics were really all that hard, and the fights weren't especially mindfucky either. It will be interesting to see where this stacks when compared to the other raids, because I got some conflicting responses from everyone else when I asked how this one stacks up against them. My biggest complaint after my first playthrough of this is how it feels disconnected from the story overall. We got some introductory dialogue, but we didn't get anything else to fill us in on what was happening, and thus I'm left confused as to why we are defeating these Vex enemies in the Blackgarden and what we hope to stop. Also, what happened to the artifact signal? I guess being in the pyramid makes us isolated from the rest of the Vanguard, but all of these gaps in information made my overall objective unclear. In any case, I would like to shout out my raid teammates, Tio, Curse of Avarice, Pluto World, Helvetica, Califont, and EXO on Bungie for showing me this raid. It is quite an enjoyable time, and I anticipate doing all of them, especially at the higher difficulty tiers in the future. Check out my previous video for my thoughts on the Pit of Heresy, or the rest of my channel for my entire Destiny 2 journey thus far. I will be back with Beyond Light in just a few days. Good night.